Straight ahead, sounding off, Texas Congressman Craig Goldman of Fort Worth and Greg Casar of Austin discuss the deadly political violence in Minnesota and Israel's attempts to take out Iran's nuclear weapons capabilities. What's next? The Texas Capitol is abuzz over whether Governor Greg Abbott will veto a controversial THC ban Republicans approved. Plus, he's endorsed a North Texas lawmaker to become the state's new comptroller, its chief financial officer. Suing Texas, the Texas GOP says it intends to take the state to court to force it to close the Republican primaries. We asked the Republican Party chairman the impact it could have on the already contentious GOP primary battle between Senator John Cornyn and Attorney General Ken Paxton. I'm Jack Fink. Get your fix for Texas politics. Eye on Politics starts now. Good Sunday morning to you. Hope you're having a great weekend so far. We begin with what comes next at the Texas Capitol. This is deadline day for Governor Greg Abbott to veto any bills, and it comes as lawmakers are wondering if he will call them back for a special session later this summer or in the fall. The governor also made a key endorsement in the Republican primary for one of the statewide offices that's become vacated for the first time in a decade. More on that in a minute, but first back to the vetoes. For weeks now, the hemp industry and some veterans have been pressuring the governor to reject Senate Bill 3, the ban on THC products. It was an issue championed by Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, and Republican lawmakers in both the Senate and the House approved the bill. Last week, I asked the governor the factors he would consider when making his decision whether to sign or veto this legislation.
I've got 1,000 of these on my desk that I have to get through, and I haven't gotten to SB 3 yet. And so I can't tell you what the factors are. I'll tell you this, listen, there are meaningful positions and concerns on both sides of the issue, and I'll look into all of those and evaluate all of those.
The governor was in Denton last week to sign property tax relief bills. Texas voters will have to approve the tax relief in November. Republican State Senator Kelly Hancock of North Richland Hills has a new high-profile job. Outgoing Texas Comptroller Glenn Hager hired him to serve as the new chief clerk and swore him into office. When Hager leaves June 30th to become chancellor of the Texas A&M University system, Hancock will become the acting Texas Comptroller, the state's chief financial officer. That'll take place on July 1st. Hager served in the position for 10 years, and this is a rare opening for a statewide office. Hancock also announced he's running for comptroller during the March 2026 Republican primary, and Governor Abbott wasted no time and endorsed him. It's a crowded Republican primary. Hancock will face Railroad Commissioner Christy Craddock and former state Senator Don Huffines of Dallas. I asked Hancock how this all developed and why he wants this job.
Yeah, Jack, it's a great job. And I mean, all the really vital things, the big things that are important to Texas and Texas taxpayers. You'd be surprised how many of them rest here in the comptroller's office. I mean, you take everything we've done along the border, you know, the building of the border wall, all that flow of revenue is coming through the comptroller's office. You know, the federal government's talking about reimbursement to Texans and Texas taxpayers, and so we look forward to taking those federal dollars and replacing state dollars with federal dollars and able to get those dollars back to Texas taxpayers. And then, you know, the latest thing this last session when we passed that education as savings account, providing educational freedom, which has been something I've pushed for 30 years as a school board member, as a legislator, and of course now those are going to be implemented through the comptroller's office. So this is just a great place to be right now.
And I was going to ask you about that because this is going to be a big test for you, getting this $1 billion education savings account program in place. You've got a year to do it. And so I'm wondering, how important is it to you that, A, this gets done on time and that it is easy for parents to access?
Vitally important, and I think that's kind of why we made these moves as soon as we did, and kind of so we can get going. And it's where I think my educational background is going to be very helpful. And Jack, as you know, I've dealt with challenges all my life. You know, diagnosed with rare kidney disease 30 years ago, dealing with that for 30 years, going through a kidney transplant just 3 years ago, and you know, I'm used having being challenged and challenges, and I'm excited about it and thrilled to be working with Governor Abbott, which I know this was a big part of his program. He was very concerned making sure that we get these education savings account out and available to the public and very transparent, and the accountability is there. So I'm excited about it.
After you were sworn in, you quickly announced that you want to keep this job permanently, and so that you are running in the Republican primary in March in 2026. And Governor Abbott quickly endorsed you, but you've got two competitors already,
Yep.
Former State Senator Don Huffines of Dallas, who you serve with in the state Senate, and then also the Railroad Commissioner, Christy Craddock. What separates you from them? Why do you think you are best suited for this job over them?
Jack, I'm really the only one that has ever put together a budget. I worked on Senate Finance for 10 years and put together a budget. I worked in Article 3, which is education. I'm a small business owner, so I can relate to the average Texan in this office and understand what customer service is all about. So, I don't think any other candidates have the experience that I had. They don't have the education experience with school boards.
And one of your competitors, Don Huffines, said today on X, he said, quote, "The political elite are manipulating the system to install another go-along to get-along lapdog as state controller." What's your response to that?
Yeah. Oh, Jack, you've known me a long time. That's probably the last thing I am. I mean, I can relate with the average citizen as much as anybody. Robin and I started our own business from scratch. I mean, we got down to very little in the bank, where she's wondering if this business is ever going to actually make a profit. And so we've scratched and clawed. I was never born with a silver spoon in my mouth. And so I think I can relate much better than most of the candidates in this race to the average Texan. And so I think that kind of separates us. There is a difference there. And I'm the only one with the governor's endorsement.
Hancock resigned from the Senate. Governor Abbott will have to call a special election for this Tarrant County Senate seat. State Representative Nate Schatzline of Fort Worth tells me he's considering a run for this Senate seat. Well, we're just getting started on Eye on Politics. The Texas GOP chair tells us why closing the Republican primaries will help the party and why they intend to take the state to court. But next, members of Congress from Texas discuss whether the U.S. should help Israel finish the job of taking out Iran's nuclear weapon capabilities when Eye on Politics returns. Welcome back to Eye on Politics. Governor Abbott says Texas DPS is on heightened alert after a threat made against at least one state lawmaker who was set to appear at a No Kings rally against President Trump at the state capitol last weekend. One man was arrested. It follows the assassination of a Minnesota state lawmaker and her husband, and the shooting of another Minnesota lawmaker and his wife. And last week, Israel began its air assault against Iran's nuclear weapon capability. We went one-on-one with Democratic Congressman Greg Casar of Austin, and my first question was about Israel and Iran.
Iran shouldn't have a nuclear weapon, but we don't need to start big regional wars that could put U.S. troops in danger in order to do it. I've been a supporter of what President Obama did, which was used diplomacy to secure a no nuclear weapon deal. Unfortunately, President Donald Trump ripped that deal to shreds. Iran started developing more nuclear capacity, and now we're in this very dangerous situation, not just for people in Israel and in Iran, but frankly for people around the world and for American troops. That's why I'm a co-sponsor of a bipartisan resolution with Republican Congressman Massey saying that Trump cannot go and send U.S. troops to war without speaking with the American people and getting the approval of the United States Congress. The Constitution says the American people, through the Congress, has the power to declare war, and that the president, whether he's a Democrat or a Republican, the president, in this case President Trump, cannot go get the United States into another endless war in the Middle East on his own.
There's a lot of discussion right now as to whether the U.S. should or will help Israel finish what they're doing by somehow dropping the 30,000-pound bombs that can destroy the bunker, where, the nuclear facility in a bunker in a mountain. And there's question as to, will the U.S. deliver that to Israel, or will the U.S. just do the job itself? What's your thought about that? Does that in itself require an act of Congress or not?
My entire adult life, we've been told that the United States is just going to do this quick thing or that operation in the Middle East, and that everything is going to go perfectly and it's not going to drag us into an endless war. And then it ultimately has. We've had the longest wars in American history here in the Middle East. And so I don't think that it's just as simple.
Wanted to ask you about the other big headline this past week. Americans and elected officials all over were devastated and outraged by this act of political violence in Minnesota. And so I'm wondering, first, your reaction and what is being done to prevent more of that, that you can tell us.
It's horrific what happened to the Speaker Emerita in Minnesota and the killing of both her and her husband, the shooting of more elected officials. Political violence in all its forms has to stop, and it has to be denounced equally by folks on both sides of the aisle. Look, things have certainly been getting worse in this country since Congresswoman Gabby Giffords was shot, Republican leader Steve Scalise being targeted for assassination, and shot Nancy Pelosi being targeted for being killed, and her husband being mauled and battered January 6th, where hundreds of rioters went and stormed the Capitol trying to kill members of Congress. And we had Capitol police officers die because of that incident. It just has to stop.
Republican Congressman Craig Goldman of Fort Worth also weighed in on the Middle East and whether Iran should be allowed to have a nuclear weapon.
President Trump has made it very clear, made it clear from day one, that Iran should not have the ability and capability to have a nuclear weapon. Obviously, the intelligence got to be enough to where not only was the United States agreeable to Israeli making the strikes, Israel decided to make those strikes because of the fear that Iran was getting close enough to have the nuclear weapons. And we all know that if Iran received a nuclear weapon, the first target would have been Israel, the second target would have been the United States.
Because there's a lot of discussion now about whether should or will the U.S. give Israel the 30,000-pound bunker busting bomb, and will Israel deliver that bomb itself, even though it doesn't have its own aircraft that really could do it, or have the American B-2 bomber actually finish the job? Where are you on that?
Well, one, that's a decision the President of the United States needs to make in conjunction with Israel. Again, they have the intelligence, they have the briefings, they know the truth, what's going on over there, of whether or not they're at the ability to, again, Iran has the ability to enrich and make that type of weapon, and whether or not it's necessary to go in and destroy it all. So that's a decision the President needs to make.
You would support that, though?
I'd support 100%.
Why?
Why? Because Iran has said, the leaders of Iran have said that they want to wipe out of the face of the earth Israel, and they want to kill Americans. They are an enemy. And the best we can do is to, if we can't take out an enemy, is to limit their abilities to take out Israel or hurt Americans.
What do you say to those who say that the U.S. should not be guided by Israel's timetable on this?
I don't know that the United States was. No one knows what conversations were had in the last few weeks or months between President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu. Only those two know.
There's also been a lot of discussion of whether there should be regime change. Israel has openly told the Iranian people, hey, we're behind you if you want to overthrow the supreme ruler. What do you think about that?
Well, I think we've seen Iranians in America, Iranians who live here, who are protesting in the streets in favor of Israel, who are saying that what Israel is doing should have been done a long time ago, and they're in favor of it in hopes that they do get a regime change.
The other terrible headline this week, we saw this political violence in the state of Minnesota where a state representative and her husband were assassinated,
Yeah.
and another state senator and his wife were shot. I guess they're going to recover. But what was your reaction when you first heard this, and what should be done about
Well,
this?
one, it's horrific. It's absolutely horrific that happened to anybody, especially an elected official. All because they're an elected official, it seems like that they were targeted in that manner. What should be done about it is more awareness, I think, on all elected officials, more awareness of their surroundings and what's happening, and then take all threats seriously.
Up next, the Trumps get into the cell phone business and why the Texas GOP says it's going to take the state to court to close the Republican primaries. Eye on Politics comes right back. The Texas GOP intends to sue the state of Texas so it can close the Republican primaries. I asked Texas Republican Party Chairman Abraham George why this is necessary and what impact it will have on the already contentious GOP primary for U.S. Senate between Senator John Cornyn and Attorney General Ken Paxton.
The Republican Party of Texas, we wanted to have a closed primaries for many years now. So we've had this as a priority, as a part of platform for many cycles, and we expected our legislators to take care of this at the legislative session. In the last convention that was held in San Antonio in 2024 convention, about 10,000 people delegation came together and said, we're going to change our rules to have the Republican primaries closed. And we had about 3 bills in the last legislative session that we liked and we expected it to pass. But unfortunately, that did not happen. So we are left with an option that is to sue the state.
So legally, you think that a judge can decide this, or is it a case where the judges say you got to get the law changed through the legislature?
No, there is other states who's done this in the past, including some Republican states. So this is done. This has happened before with other states. So we believe the lieutenant governor, the governor, the attorney general, they have to uphold the law that is put together by the legislator. But a court can say, that the law is unconstitutional when it comes to Republican Party. They have the right to have their primaries closed if they choose to have it. So we are expecting our statewide leaders to be on our side on this.
Why is it so important to the party that there be closed primaries?
We come to a point a lot of times that there are legislators who get elected by Republican under the Republican banner, but a lot of times they get elected by Democrats. There is a reason why the party is frustrated with this process of any Democrat can come and choose the Republican nominee and find the weakest Republican or even a liberal and put them on our ballot under our name, and we had to work to get them elected. So we're kind of done with that. So we want real conservatives, real Republicans who will uphold the party's principles and our priorities.
What impact do you think that's going to have in 2026? Because, as you know, we've already got a contentious GOP primary for U.S. Senate between Senator Cornyn and the Attorney General.
I don't know if there's going to be a huge difference. It's going to make any big difference in that election itself. But I don't know. I haven't looked at any of the numbers. This is not specific to any specific election, including 2026 primaries. What we are trying to do is which is something we've been working on for close to a decade to close our primaries. We believe only Republicans should choose Republican nominees.
The Trump Organization is entering the world of wireless service and cell phones called Trump Mobile. The president's sons, Don Jr. and Eric, said the goal is to bring improvements to the industry. Sarah Jenkins explains in this week's brief.
Eric Trump said the new phone and service will align with his father's plans to boost American manufacturing and employment. The plan costs $47.45 per month, a reference to President Trump's non-consecutive terms in the White House. The new Trump phone and cellular service raises a host of ethical issues, according to Robert Weissman, the co-president of the consumer rights advocacy group Public Citizen. He says rival phone companies and manufacturers could face a dilemma if they have a cheaper phone or service, or even be too intimidated to advertise. It's not clear who will manufacture the phones. The website also states that the $499 T1 phone is using the Trump name as part of a limited license agreement. With the brief, I'm Sarah Jenkins.
With the legislative session ending earlier this month, we at CBS News Texas took a very close look at how public education dominated much of the debate. Our lead education reporter, Lacey Beasley, I-Team reporter Andrea Lucia, and I discussed school choice, funding for public schools, and uncertified teachers, and more on the learning curve. And you can watch our special on our YouTube channel, CBS Texas. And don't forget, you can watch all our full interviews from today's show on our CBS Texas YouTube channel as well. And that's all for Eye on Politics this week. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Jack Fink. I am listening, and we are listening to you at CBS News Texas. From all of us here, have a great Sunday.